with plans to steal the authority from the gods, fight against the Abyss, and burn away the old world to create a new one. Pierro has some lofty ambitions. For most people, this would be a sign of madness, and Pierro acknowledges this by naming his organization the Fatui, or the Fools. But he already has 6 of the 7 Gnosis, and has sent his strongest harbinger to claim the last one. So I think his plans are going pretty well so far. My last video on him was from almost exactly a year before the Winter Nights Lazzo trailer, so with all the new information we have now, there's a lot more to talk about. Let's start with what we know, or at least what we're told. I say this because Pierro is something of a trickster archetype with his Jester title, and we've had information presented to us as fact before that became misdirection. The latest example is Arlecchino telling us she's from Fontaine and then telling us she made it up. Pierro is from khaenri'ah and was a royal mage during the final dynasty under King Ermin, known as the Black Sun or Eclipse Dynasty. We can tell he's a pure-blooded khaenri'ahn like Dainsleif, as they were all cursed with immortality, while the people with ancestry from other nations were turned into Halichurls. Being a royal mage, he was well read and knows many secrets the people of khaenri'ah discovered, which are now even less well known after khaenri'ah was destroyed 500 years ago. This destruction was something he could have stopped if Ermin and the sages listened to his warnings. But instead, they tore open the Veil of Sin, which brought forth divine judgment against the nation in the form of the Archons and the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles. Pierro may have been the one to send a note to Knight Marshal and Fortis to petition the king to allow them to manufacture machinery according to their old standards, as he noticed that the new power source they were using had some potentially major flaws. Stating that the gods are untrustworthy is something we can expect from any khaenri'ahn, but the next part hints that the Abyss is the greater threat, as he calls the demons ineffable, which means too great to be described in words, indicating that something sinister was going on with this new power source, and it was likely inspired by the will of the Abyss. I think this will was what tempted King Ermin and the sages, encouraging them to tear open the Veil of Sin, that we'll talk about in a minute. As for who these sages were, they're likely the 5 sinners known as Rhindaughter, Sertologi, Reria, Hruptatia, and Vedafulnir, Dainsleif's older brother. Dain tells us that they didn't help to defend khaenri'ah when they were needed, which implies that they had aligned themselves with the Abyss and likely viewed the regular people of khaenri'ah as beneath them. We have more evidence pointing towards this, as Vedafulnir would later go on to influence Clothar Alberic to create the Abyss Order, even calling Clothar a creature, which shows he views himself as above regular humans. Then there's Sertologi, who is the origin of Child's File Legacy transformation, which translates to something like Demon King armament, and looks to be a unique variant of the Abyss Heralds and Lectors. Rhindaughter apparently created some of the monsters associated with the Abyss, like the Riftwolves, Jorin, and Elinus. Though for Jorin and Elinus, it was more like she created bodies for their souls to inhabit. We can see her summoning these spirits in the Festering Desire text. Unborn life, unfulfilled wishes, tragic dreams at the edge of the universal darkness that could never come true. Indwell my body and descend unto this world, implying that she first took the spirits into herself before placing them into their giant bodies like Jorin and Elinus. We learn in the Undying Flame book that she only has moments of lucidity or clearness of mind, which may indicate the corruption or erosion is taking a heavy toll on her. This could be through her ties to the Abyss along with the other sinners. But she's also a member of the Hexen Circle, who seem to be on the side of keeping Teyvat's borders safe, as we can see Alice talk about in the KFC Wings description. so I don't think each sinner is necessarily mind-controlled or fully on board with the goals of the Abyss, and all seem to be doing their own thing rather than working as a team. With the quote just a minute ago of having beings possess her body, it seems she was doing this out of compassion, though this seems to have had the effect of eroding her mind and emotions, which may be why in Albedo's character story 3, she is described as cold and strict. After having to kill the people that had turned into monsters to escape, Pierro met the Tsaritsa, the cryo-archon of Snezhnaya. Both of them felt that the divine judgment on the people of khaenri'ah was too extreme, and created an organization to fight against the gods and the Abyss. They named this organization the Fatui, meaning fools, and would go on to create the strongest army of all 7 nations. It seems that back then, the Tsaritsa was the god of love, but somehow lost the love she had for humanity. We don't know if this was due to losing someone, discovering a dark truth of the world, or, like I speculate with Rhindaughter, the Abyss somehow took or corrupted the love she once had. It mirrors both Cocolia from Star Rail and Anna Shariak from Honkai Impact 3rd, both compassionate ice-based characters that were corrupted by the equivalent of the Abyss. Cocolia even wanted to destroy the current world and remake it in her image, sounding a lot like Pierro and the Tsaritsa talking about burning away the old world and having her rule the new one. We can see at the end of the Lazzo teaser that the ice surrounding the coffin has a purple tint within it, which could indicate that the Tsaritsa really is corrupted by the Abyss. This could go a few ways in my mind. If the Tsaritsa is only partially corrupted and still has control of her mind, she may be in a sort of hibernation period like Venti did to remove Joran's corruption, making sure that the Abyss doesn't fully take over. The Tsaritsa's ice may also have some purification properties too, as in the Stainless Bloom description, Signora says, "Let the darkness of corruption, the pain of the world, and the humans, beasts, and the sin they carry, all be purified by silent ice." Which would mean if she is corrupted, it must be really bad if she has to spend most of her time trying to purify herself. If she is in this state most of the time, Pierro would be the de facto ruler of the Fatui, and his plan of burning away the old world may be the only way to fully remove her corruption. As he says, our Tsaritsa will once again be a god who loves all humans. Though since Cocolia was convinced to destroy the world to create a better one by the equivalent of the Abyss, perhaps it's using Pierro's desperation to save the Tsaritsa as a way of carrying out its goals. Alternatively, Pierro may be knowingly on the side of the Abyss, as he says, "The sages think themselves to be all-knowing, but we alone are wise to the virtue in those acts of folly." If the sages are the 5 sinners, those acts of folly are related to the Abyss. This may indicate that he's secretly aligned himself with the Abyss too, even though he says the Fatui are against it. Whether this means he changed his mind after the Veil of Sin was torn open, or he's always been on the side of the Abyss, is something we can't say for sure, but if he's always been on the side of the Abyss, he could have been responsible for the Tsaritsa becoming corrupted and is using her image to gain control of Snezhnaya. It may also mean that he lied about warning Ermin and the sages and was potentially even one of them. Pierro would personally recruit some of the Harbingers like Signora and Dottore, choosing people that felt betrayed by the gods. But others would be brought to him through circumstance, like Dottore discovering the Scaramouche, Child getting rowdy after falling into the Abyss, and Arlecchino killing the previous knave. Speaking of Arlecchino, her discussion with Pierro is what pushed me into making this video, as it's the first real conversation we've had from him so far. We've seen him give speeches and convince some Harbingers to join the Fatui, but because Arlecchino is so perceptive with how people's minds work, seeing him through her eyes gives us a slightly clearer view of his personality. In this section, Pierro is first described as the director whose expression lay hidden behind his half mask, indicating that there's something he's hiding, which would fit with how secretive he is, as Arlecchino says.
As the original Harbinger, much about him remains a mystery. Upon our first meeting, he recognized my background with ease. Yet to this day, I know little about him.
Knowledge is power, and I don't think Pierro was one to share power freely unless it's to his advantage. He offers to answer 5 questions that she might have, telling her that he can answer freely about the Fatui's principles or the Tsaritsa's ideals without reservation. This is quite clever, as he's guiding her into asking specific questions he doesn't mind answering, while implying that asking about anything else might not guarantee an honest or complete answer. But Arlecchino is observant after her harsh upbringing and seems to have an extremely good sense for when people are up to something. As we can see, Arlecchino did not wholly trust the Jester's open honesty. Pierro then moves to answering a question she hasn't asked, but is most likely thinking, why did they choose her to be a harbinger? To this he gives a vague answer as you'd expect, but seems to hint that he views her as naive and willing to die for her ideals, while he's willing to endure anything to accomplish his goals, almost as if he views those willing to give their lives as foolish with short-term views, while him enduring the pain of existence is a more noble path. But the last question is the one that was probably the most shocking in this section. Arlecchino asks what will become of her and the House of the Hearth after everything is finished, and Pierro says, I will be frank, none of you have any place in my ideals, for I plan only to uphold the virtue of folly. But I can guarantee that our Tsaritsa will once again be a god who loves all humans, and in her ideals shall all humans' wishes be granted. We'll talk more about this virtue of folly a bit later, but as Arlecchino is leaving, a mist that covered her eyes began to part. Now this could be nothing and just some way of describing her confusion or being lost in her thoughts, but since we're dealing with Pierro, who is a royal mage of khaenri'ah and known to be a trickster, I wonder if this mist was literal and has some sort of mind-altering abilities. I think it could be that he's erased parts of her memory without her realizing. It starts with him answering the first question when she hasn't even asked it. This could be because it's an obvious question someone would have and easy to guess without them having to voice the question. But then we jump to question 3, totally skipping question 2 by just adding 3 dots to imply something is missing. After question 3, we then jump straight to question 5. So we've got 2 answers and 3 questions missing from this conversation, and I'd bet Arlecchino is smart enough to ask some questions that Pierro doesn't want her to remember the answer to. These must be very important to him and his plans, as he's willing to tell Arlecchino that her and the House of the Hearth aren't something he cares about, and possibly, even if slightly, implies that he may dispose of them after their usefulness to him has ended. Coming back to it, the line that led me to discovering who I'm almost certain is one of Pierro's inspirations is, I will be frank, none of you have any place in my ideals, for I only plan to uphold the virtue of folly. Which reminded me of the book by Erasmus known as In Praise of Folly. The book is a satirical critique of the religion, society, and politics of his time, with the main character Folly praising herself and her influence over people. We can think of her as the Tsaritsa for this theory. Erasmus was a beacon of rationality at this time, as he was critical of both the Catholic Church and the Protestant reformers, which was a very tough spot to put himself in when both sides were adamant that their side was virtuous and the other contemptible. Many of the more fanatic elements of both sides hated him for his level-headed criticisms of both, and even though he was a clergyman of the Catholic Church and was extremely well learned, he never rose through the ranks due to the higher-ups viewing him in not vigorous enough in his defense of the church, which sounds a lot like Pierro to me. He was against the gods and the abyss, but wasn't listened to by the sages or King Ermin due to his level of learning not being as high as theirs. But rather than that meaning he wasn't as intelligent, I think his learning was in relation to the abyss, which almost seems to have replaced the gods as a symbol of worship in khaenri'ah, at least to the higher-ups. We've already gone over the sinners being tied to the abyss, and Ermin named his royal guard the Black Serpent Knights, clearly named after the Black Serpent that seems to be the embodiment or ruler of the abyss. The statuettes even seem to be the serpent speaking into Ermin's mind, as they talk about the eternal peace of the pitch dark void, which we can link to the abyss or star-devouring darkness. Erasmus also had a close friend named Thomas More, who wrote the novel Utopia, which was a critique of European society, with Utopia representing what a perfect society might look like, a lot like the utopia Pierro wants to create after destroying the old world. As he says, the Tsaritsa will grant all human wishes in the new world. One last thing on folly is that it was a sin according to the Bible. The prosperity of fools shall destroy them, but no man is destroyed save for sin. Therefore, folly is a sin. So I wonder if this means that the Tsaritsa's ideal is now the foolishness or sins of humanity, and Pierro holding it as a virtue means that he wants to empower her by making fools of the world. This might even tie into why they want the Gnosis, if she can absorb the power of the curses within them. If they're upholding the virtue of being a sinner and aren't aligned with the abyss already, they're playing a dangerous game that could very easily backfire, as the abyss isn't something to be underestimated. It could also be that Pierro is making a fool of the divine, as he outmaneuvers them by playing his game of silent chess. The chess game shown in the Lazzo teaser has been speculated to be based on a game by the chess master Garry Kasparov against the Deep Blue AI. I had a whole script on this, but to be honest it was kind of boring analyzing each game, so I'll skip to the most interesting parts. I think the quote from the start of the video about silence being the true endgame of chess is in relation to the sixth and final game of the first match of Kasparov versus Deep Blue. In this game, Kasparov had figured out how to trick Deep Blue by playing the long game, which it didn't seem to be able to compute or understand. I'm no chess expert, but there are moves in the game known as quiet moves, which neither create an immediate threat or defends against one either, which I think describes Kasparov's tactics in this game. The AI didn't understand that it was being quietly or silently set up against until it was too late and it was cornered, unable to move except to shift its king back and forth from two positions, giving Kasparov all the time he needed to finish the game as he wanted. So if we think of the heavenly principles as an AI designed to keep an eye on Teyvat and respond to immediate threats, Pierro making silent or quiet moves as he's been doing is setting his side up to win without Celestia even realizing until it's too late. So let's see what Project Stuja brings with it, as it could be the real start of their war against Celestia, similar to Fimbulwinter from Norse mythology, covering the world in ice as a prelude to Ragnarok, the fiery end of the world. Maybe the power Pierro's been collecting is to empower the Tsaritsa enough to cover the entire planet in ice. Just to add a few things in at the end here, as they're not fully formed theories. The book The Feline Firm features a character named Pero, which comes from the same etymological source as Pierro, and the Italian bridge founder of the Blue Team, the most successful team in bridge history, was named Carl Alberto Pero. He was a non-playing captain and would direct the rest of his team, a lot like Pierro does with the Harbingers. The Feline Firm story also features a character named Lady Frigga, likely referencing not Frigga, who I've theorized before was the Queen of khaenri'ah. As for the white cat that Pero sends away, I can only think of the Tsaritsa with her fur representing snow, or the Abyss Twin with their white clothing, and the cat that takes them away as someone related to or an embodiment of the Abyss, potentially meaning that they were corrupted due to Pierro being tricked by the Abyss into helping it capture them. And if this was the Tsaritsa, his plan to remove her corruption being even more personal, as he blames himself for it happening. One more thing, if he can erase or obscure people's memories, as he could have done with Arlecchino, and he's as powerful, or more powerful than most of the gods, as his top 3 harbingers are at godlike levels, I wonder if he's the one that obscured the Abyss Twins' fate from Irminsul. They did live together at one point, as Scaramouche tells us, so if he was able to, he definitely had a chance. So what do you think Pierro's motivations are? Is he genuinely trying to save the Tsaritsa and humanity, or are his intentions more nefarious and in line with the goals of the Abyss? Let me know what you think he's up to in the comments. If you're still here, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment to help me out with the algorithm. If not, let me know what I can improve on. Good luck with your wishes, and I hope you have a wonderful day.